Hello and welcome to the world of stories. I'm sure you're here for a bedtime story to help you drift into sleep. And so, let's begin. In a village in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains of America lived a man called Rip Van Winkle. Everybody liked Rip, who was a generous, easygoing man who was always glad to lend a hand to his neighbors. In fact, Rip Van Winkle was always to be found doing anybody else's work except his own. And didn't his wife remind him about it all the time? Nag, nag, nag it was all day long. Rip, if you're not so busy varnishing Mrs. Green's fence today, you can mend the hose in the shed. Instead of helping to burn the farmer's rubbish, you can feed the chickens and milk the cows. Then, if you can stop yourself from building Aunt Jacob's wall for him, there's our potatoes to dig up, and the wagon to be washed down, and the gutters to be cleared out, and the yard to be swept. And so it was every day, on and on and on and on. Every now and again, Rip Van Winkle whistled for his faithful dog, Wolf, shouldered his gun, and strolled away from his wife without a word. Off he would stroll up the mountainside, along the river and through the pine forests, until his wife's screeching voice had grown so faint that he could no longer hear it, and he was surrounded only by the twittering of the birds and the rustling of the trees in the breeze, and the panting of his companion by his side. Rip always knew there would be heck to pay when he got back, but a day off in the peaceful sunshine was well worth it. One day, when Rip had disappeared on one of those rambles, he was taking a rest under a shady tree when he heard a voice calling his name. Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle! Came the high shrill cry. Wolf's ears flattened against his skull, and he gave a long, low growl. Rip looked in the direction Wolf was snarling, and there among the long grass was a nodding green feather. The nodding green feather was tucked into a bright red cap, and the cap was on the head of a bearded man no higher than his own boot, struggling under the weight of a big beer barrel. Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle! Shouted the dwarf crossly. Will you get yourself over here and give me a hand with this barrel before it squashes me? Rip was so used to doing what he was told that he jumped up to help at once. That's better, wheezed the dwarf, as Rip took one end of the heavy barrel. Now up we go! Rip nearly tripped over as the dwarf stumped away up the mountain, pulling the barrel and Rip Van Winkle with him. After at least an hour's tramping and much huffing and puffing, the dwarf led Rip Van Winkle straight behind a thundering waterfall, through a hidden door and into an enormous cavern. Dwarves were swarming everywhere. Some were dressed in aprons, pouring endless tankards of beer out of big kegs just like the one Rip was helping to carry. Others were playing ninepins, rolling smooth round black rocks at copper skittles and cheering loudly. Yet more dwarves was drinking and clinking the tankards together, singing noisy songs. Pull up a chair, Rip's new friend invited him, lowering the barrel to the floor and passing him a tankard. Help yourself to a drink. You must be gasping thirsty after that climb. I know I am. The stunned Rip Van Winkle did just that. My, that's mighty powerful stuff, he spluttered, as he swallowed down a huge gulp of the dwarf beer. But whatever it is, it's very good. He licked his lips and poured himself another tankful. None of the dwarves was taking a blind bit of notice of him, so Rip Van Winkle sat back and began to watch the ninepins competition. Well, this is the most pleasant way to spend the afternoon, he thought, helping himself to another beer, and another, and another, and another. And before Rip Van Winkle even realized he was drunk, he had slumped forward onto a huge flat rock and was snoring loudly. When Rip woke up, the dwarfs were gone and the caverns was empty. Come on, Wolf, he yawned, and they both stood up and stretched. We'd better hurry back or we'll never hear the last of it. Through the little door, they strolled and out from behind the waterfall and off down the mountain. Wait for it, he murmured to his dog as he climbed the porch steps to his house. Any minute now, that wife of mine will start screeching fit to wake the dead. Rip put his hand on the doorknob and turned. He nearly walked smack bang into the door as it failed to open. Well, this sure needs a little bit of oil, he murmured to himself. He rattled the knob and twisted it about. Funny, Rip remarked. I think it's locked. She never locks the door. Never. At that very moment, the front door opened, and there stood a woman with an angry face. Who are you? The woman snapped. What are you up to? Trying to get in my front door? She was not his wife. In fact, Rip Van Winkle had never seen her before. Who are you? Gasped Rip. What are you doing in my house? Your house? The woman scoffed. I've lived here for over 19 years. Rip Van Winkle backed off the porch and looked around him. He scratched his head and stared. The woman was right. It wasn't his house. Well, it looked similar to his house, but the curtains at the window were different. There were strange chairs on the veranda. The wagon in the yard was not his wagon. But how? Stuttered Rip. Where is Mrs. Van Winkle? Mrs. Van Winkle? The puzzled woman gulped. She left here nearly 20 years ago, just after her husband wandered off and disappeared. Now, be off with you, or I'll call the police. 20 years? Marveled Rip Van Winkle as he wandered away, stroking his beard. His beard! Suddenly, Rip realized that his beard hung down to his knees. The woman's word had to be true. He had been asleep for 20 years. Rip Van Winkle's hands trembled with a shock as he reached down and patted the bemused wolf comfortingly. Then his mouth began to curve up in a small smile. Just imagine, Wolf, he murmured. No more nagging. Ever. Rip Van Winkle turned and strolled across the street, whistling a merry tune. Happily, the inn was in the same place as it always had been. And when the townspeople heard his story, he never had to buy himself another pint of beer ever again. That's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. Have a great night. Please like and subscribe if you like my contents. I shall update daily and continue with my best efforts. Good night.